Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are ya? We are almost at the end of May now, just heading into summer. Today's episode with Jen, we kind of joke like, this may be the one that we end up trashing, but I think it's okay. We really talk a lot about boundaries, but how they show up in different places. And that just because you may be skilled in setting boundaries in one setting doesn't necessarily mean that you're skilled in setting them in others. And how do we manage different situations? And I share a couple of things that have happened recently and where I find that it's easy to set boundaries, where I struggle, what I did when I struggled. I just think that there's a lot that we talk about. And Jen also talks about Emily Nagoski's work on stress. And I'll try and remember to put that in the show notes because I think that's important. I talk about being really dysregulated and how did I navigate and get through that. I don't know. I think it's pretty helpful. I don't think I have a lot more to say. But boundaries seem to often be an issue, and how do we navigate them when we struggle? I think that's all I have. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Patricia. You know, I am okay, doing the best I can over here.
Yeah.
Busy.
Yeah,
riding my waves. It's funny, I met up with someone today that I hadn't seen in many months and was filling her in on everything that's been happening since, I guess, like August. And she was so cute. She was like, well, you know, our heart rate monitors should be going like ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. And if it's straight, there's the problem. And I was like, that is perfect.
Aw, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, I just got an Instacart order from you delivered. We were getting ready to record and somebody came to the door. I knew you'd sent something. So I've had it challenging 24 hours, which we're not going to talk about too much today, but that was very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really thankful for Instacart for so many reasons, but I'm glad that it was there because that's what I would do if I lived nearby.
Yeah.
You know, I'd bring you some stuff and it's hard. I'm sorry about your last 24 hours.
Well, thank you. It has been hard. And I was reflecting that the last time something like this happened, it just knocked me for a total loop. And while I got incredibly dysregulated last night, my heart was pounding and tightness in my chest. And this happened right before bedtime. But I did what I needed to do. I did some physical shaking to try and release that trauma. I did some crying and I expected to not sleep at all last night, and I slept some and was able to paddle this morning. So I think under the circumstances, I'm doing okay. And this kind of has to do with being assertive and boundaries and speaking my truth and standing in my truth. And that's something that, gosh, it's been an ongoing struggle. And I really like to believe that I'm good at setting boundaries. And in some instances I am. And I'm just seeing in other areas where it's just really hard for me.
Yeah. Boundaries are always tricky.
Yeah.
You know, I like to think that the harder a boundary is or the more reactive our person that we have to set the boundary with is, like the more that's the evidence that it's needed.
Yes. And I find here at home, so I'm having my gremlins about like, how much can I talk about without getting people upset with me? Even in my home, I find it hard to set boundaries sometimes with my kids or their partners around what I need and the narrative that I have. And it's not that they're difficult, but I think I have this narrative of, you know, I'm being picky or it's just me. And it's hard for me to assert myself and that it doesn't work for me to do that. And it's not always around people that are difficult to set boundaries with. Like we kind of have sort of this dysregulation and thing that happened last night and then what's going on in the home. And those are two entirely separate situations. So How more vague and unspecific can we be?
It's okay. It's hard. I mean, I appreciate what you do here on the podcast. And I know that even in my work with clients, if something is really recent and really tender,
Mm-hmm.
like it's hard to talk about. And sometimes, I mean, I do think that we can speak thematically
Mm-hmm.
without getting into details in a way that benefits people. Like what you were saying about how you dealt with the stress of the last 24 hours, that was a game changer for me. This idea that there's the stressor that's
Mm-hmm.
happening, and then there's the experience of stress in your body. That comes right out of Emily Nagoski's book,
Mm-hmm.
Burnout. And when I read that, I was like, oh, game changer, right? Because we can handle them separately, which is in and of itself a boundary, right? It's an inner boundary where we're not confounding what's happening to us with who we are necessarily or what we're experiencing. Because especially with a highly sensitive nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
I can get very, very reactive physically, even though in my head, I know everything's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or it'll get straightened out. I don't know if I talked about it on the podcast. This I could talk about with some detail.
Mm-hmm.
Did I talk about this on the podcast already? I had an IRS check, my estimated quarterly taxes, which is for me a considerable sum in a check that was supposed to go to the IRS back in September, and it was December. I was preparing for January's payment, right? And I was like, what is that again? Like, how much was it? I was trying to make sure I had enough to cover it. And I look and I saw this, it's probably the biggest check I write. And I'm like, Sadie Haskins, or, I'm like, what? Like, why doesn't that say IRS?
Mm-hmm.
So someone had intercepted my check
From the mailbox.
from the mailbox,
Like a city
it,
mailbox.
which is apparently a Philly thing.
Mm-hmm.
And once I reached out to my neighbors, I've discovered that it is something. And I was so mad because I tried to do it electronically and the site was didn't let me do it.
Mm.
So this idea about that is something that would have really, really rattled me, kept me up all night,
Right.
All of that stuff. And I knew it was and it was a process that really only recently resolved. Here it is, April, right? The bank there were tons of hoops to jump through, like get a police report. First, apparently here in Philly, it takes 12 weeks to get a police report back. And I had to get something notarized for the bank. And it was like just all of these things. And I'm like, you know what? I was able to take care of the stress in my body separate from the stressor and deal with them separately. And that's so important. That's one thing that when we talk about boundaries too, we want to separate the boundary, whatever it is, from feelings about the boundary and meaning that we ourselves may be making about the boundary or that someone else might be making about our boundary. And I can probably speak a little specifically about that too, but I want to give you a chance to talk before
No, you're good. Keep going.
I monopolize I almost said session. It's been a long day.
It has been a long day. Yeah, we usually record in a few hours earlier than now. So
yeah, thanks for your flexibility and rolling with me. I've been life's been full and busy and for the most part good, but there has been some very emotionally evocative
you've had some
things
hard
going on.
things going on around the edges. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff that you don't have control over. It's just stuff that happens in your life that you don't have control over that's really hard.
Yeah. One thing I've discovered recently is coming to peace with there are some situations in life where it's not really possible to feel good. And I'm just going to have to make space for some degree of suffering. I've got some family things going on, not my little immediate family, but more like extended family type stuff where some boundaries were needed. Really, I'm calling this year. So I'm turning 50 and I wanted a couple of things. Someone introduced this idea of so it's the 28th of April, right? And so the 28th of every month for the next year, taking off and doing something nice for myself.
I love that.
Which I love because I can't seem to bring myself to want to do something big on the day. I don't want the stress of it. We'll see. I don't want to be the center of attention. I don't want to, I wanted this to be my heck yeah year, where I really check in with what are the things that I want to do, because I'm really good at not doing that and just doing what a lot of other people need from me. And there's a lot of that feels very good to me and feels very congruent. But what I've learned recently is that I have to have space to be kind of the villain in someone else's story if they're not understanding my boundaries. That the meaning that they may make about my boundaries is not necessarily the truth. And that can be a conversation, right? And that it's really, really important. The feeling that place, like when you feel a no, like where do you feel your no in your body? So for me, can I honor that? And even sometimes what I've taken to doing recently in my own therapy work with my therapist is being able to say, like, to someone in the moment, I'm a no right now. And I don't even know why. I'm going to go and talk to my therapist about it. And if I figure anything out, I'll let you know. But my boundary is just a no right now. And it doesn't mean I don't love you. I don't care. It's just, I'm human. I have limitations and I'm a no. So this is going to be an interesting year.
I love your idea of celebrating on the 28th of every month.
Yeah, I thought that was such a sweet idea. Yeah. I really like that, to thread that kind of self-care and self-centering throughout the year.
Yeah.
I do find that as I've been getting older, I really do need to take care of myself a lot better than I did when I was younger. I could get away with stuff, right? Like I get away with all-nighters in a way I can't get away with now. And yeah, it's interesting place to try to put my arms around, right? And embrace.
Yeah. I'm having a hard time with content today because I really want to talk about this thing that happened, but I don't think it's the best idea. And so I think this may be the episode that just doesn't make it. I don't know.
It might be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I was thinking with the challenge that I have around setting boundaries at home, both of my boys are home. It's been really sweet. The boys have been here. One of the girlfriends was here. Zeke is here. Josh was going to take Zeke home, the dog, but he's going to Laughlin with my husband. We're celebrating, the boys, my husband and sons are celebrating their birthday early. So they're going to be going to Laughlin next week. And so Josh said, can I just leave Zeke here and get him later? So he will have been with me for a couple of weeks, which is nice. He sleeps on the bed with me when Josh isn't here. And especially not having Gracie anymore. Maisie doesn't sleep on the bed with me. So having a little cuddle buddy makes me feel very good. But I was talking to Josh about this thing of, we just got new living room furniture and I have a recliner. I have like one spot where I traditionally sit in the living room, and that's my spot. I have all my stuff there. My charger is there, and I don't like people sitting in my spot when I want to sit in the living room. And we made this really clear to the kids before we got this new furniture. And the last time the kids visited, I'm not going to say who it was. Somebody sat in my spot. And if I'm not in it, that's fine. But when I come into the room, I want my spot. I just do. And they didn't move, and I had to sit somewhere else that was not very comfortable, and I wasn't very happy about it. My husband said something, and so I was talking to one of my sons about this today, and I said, my part in it is that I have a really hard time asserting myself. I don't know what it is. Or somebody comes in and turns the TV on and starts watching a show without saying, hey, I'm going to turn the TV on when everybody comes in. Let's figure out what we all want to watch. There's something about that claiming space, claiming the TV, not doing it in a way of acknowledging that there's a group of people here. And I think in some ways I'm very group minded about this is what you do if you're visiting or if you're in a group. And when people don't do that, it's really hard for me to assert myself. And so what I did was I said, this shouldn't be your responsibility. And it wasn't Josh that was doing this. It shouldn't be your responsibility. And I just have a hard time asserting myself. And so sometimes we just meet ourselves where we're at, and that has to be okay and good enough that that's where my limitation is right now. And I'd like to think of myself as being very clear and very assertive. And you know what? Maybe I'm doing so much inner work and work in areas of my life that in my home, when I go out there, like I go to the living room to rest, that's not a time I want to have to be defending my space. This is my home.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's just your place where you need a break. I love that kind of like meta awareness, like meta speak about something, especially when you have healthy, robust relationships, it's a really cool way to be like, I'm trying to develop a different pattern and it's difficult for me. And it's so cool because explaining it like that, like your family member can probably really get behind it, right? As opposed to being on the level of whatever, taking it personally. That's the meaning making, right? So you're able to say, well, this is an area where I'm trying to grow and strengthen. And we don't always have the strength or the inner resources to do it if we're tired. And that's our sanctuary.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because yesterday I went to Aqua Fitness and we get there before the doors open. So we kind of stand not up where the doors are, but a little further back. And then two people got there, I guess, thinking that the doors were open and realized that they weren't. So then they kind of broke the line by standing close to where the doors are. So then when it went to open, I felt like, dude, you weren't here. You need to get back in line. And I said something like, do you want to get in line and let us that we're here first go through? And I got a little bit of a snarky comment from somebody, but I think this is my sense of justice and rules. And we were here first. And, you know, do we have to press our noses against the door to show you that we're queuing up to go inside? It was interesting, but I didn't have a problem saying something there. But in my own home, I have a hard time. And I think that's not uncommon that we have certain areas, or my kids are here and there's a room that my son is sleeping in. And when he was here on the weekend, there's windows on this side of the house, and the neighbors, there's just a lot of activity, and he couldn't sleep, and he ended up coming out and sleeping on the couch. And so I said, oh, do you want me to text the neighbor and let him know that you're there so that they're doing anything, they can keep it down? And he was appalled that I would do that, just appalled. We had a discussion about it, and I said, fine, I won't say a word. You know, so often, I think especially as HSPs, we can advocate on other people's behalf, especially when there's a rule, a justice, a fairness issue. But when it comes to us and our own needs, you know, I question it. Am I being picky? Am I being, maybe I should just sit somewhere else? I think it's important to discuss these different facets, because it's not like I set boundaries in all situations or I don't set boundaries. I think it depends on a lot of different things.
Yeah, it definitely is context dependent.
Yeah,
for sure. That's interesting. I love that illumination too, that the thing that you're uncomfortable with, it sounds like maybe your son is comfortable with, and then flip it, vice versa. I remember as a new mom, when I was hanging out with other moms and discovering that we all had our thing that would get us, a fear. Like I was terrified of like choking, like my baby choking, stuff like that. But everyone had different fears. And so as we're sitting around talking about it, we're like, well, no, that one doesn't, like, that doesn't worry me at all. But this one, it's just, it really is funny. I think about it as life is inherently risky and uncertain. And we've got to channel all of that somewhere. And we tell a story about it. All the contextual clues as to why. And I love the generosity around, like, we make sense. I don't know about you, but there's so much comfort for me in that, because I hate that feeling of, you know, why am I like this? Why is it? What's wrong? And as opposed to, what am I needing? I don't even need to know why. So much of it's like lost in childhood anyway, you know? We all make sense. And I can just trust that. And then what do we need to do to take care of ourselves? What boundaries do we need? The care and feeding a nervous system. Yeah. As we say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, life can be overwhelming. It's a lot going on.
We both have a lot going on right now.
Yeah, it was something seeing my friend, and she cuts my hair, and just during that time that we're sitting there together going through everything. And then I was like, oh, and then this happened. Oh, and then that happened. And then there was this grief to process, and that confusion, and this uncertainty. And again, I just love the perspective she said. She said, all right, you're up and down. And that, hello, like that is the ride. And if we can, I love, and I think you helped me a lot with this, is like maintaining some cheerfulness around it. Not all the time, because I can certainly fall in my holes, but I have to. That's part of it. It's part of the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I got nothing today.
My tank's empty, Patricia.
My tank is empty. I've been taking care of business today. I really do not have very much that I feel like is meaningful or significant to share.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I have so many gremlins about like what's good enough to share, what's interesting. I think we do for as many times as you and I have just sat down and hit record. And for how many years we've been putting our heads together, whether it's the podcast or some other project that we're working on together. The fact that it's here, like, hello, it's tonight. Tonight's the questionable one that we may just edit, stay on the editing room floor, right? Just be like, pfft.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Or maybe knowing that this is good enough. It doesn't, like sometimes this is just how it's going to be. And we've been trying to catch up on recordings. And sometimes this is just the way it is.
Yeah. And again, I just want to, it's such a generous endeavor. Like this podcast has been such a labor of love from you that, yeah, if there's an episode where we are just kind of on empty, I do think it's lovely and can stand on its own. I do.
Yeah. I do want to share something that I thought was pretty sweet. Last night, both boys were here and my husband when this distressing thing happened. And we had some conflict in the house that had nothing to do with this, but just, how weird things happen sometimes. And so one of my sons came into my room afterwards to apologize and to talk because he got upset and it kind of pulled the focus away from what was going on with me. And I really needed that attention because I'd just gotten this information. And he came to give me a hug. And the longer he hugged me, the more I had to cry. And I didn't want to sob in front of my son. I don't want to burden them. And I'm a big crier. And I guess he could tell that I was holding it in. And he's like, it's okay. My son will be 23 next month. And so I just started sobbing and he just wrapped his arms around me and he kind of stroked my shoulder. He kissed me on the forehead. I mean, it was just so incredibly sweet how protective both of my boys, they came up with their solution to how they wanted to support me in this, which I just thought was incredibly thoughtful and kind. And my husband also, it just, it's good stuff. And what you and I were talking about today is even though this stuff really was very dysregulating for me and very upsetting, I also know that when things activate us or trigger us, there's growth there. And so I could get really mad at the situation and how dysregulated I got and all of these things. And it's like, if I'm still having a reaction, that means I got some more growing here to do. And I was really clear about that. And part of me kept reminding myself, because my birthday's in July, I'll be 60 this year. And I'm like, I'm almost 60 years old and I'm allowing this situation to make me feel incredibly disempowered. So throughout the night, as I kept waking, I just imagined myself having to deal with this thing and approaching this situation and reminding myself, like, I'm almost 60. I'm a grown grass woman. And really wanting to empower that part as opposed to the part that feels incredibly disempowered. And when I would wake in the middle of the night, I really tuned into what am I feeling? My throat is tight. My heart is pounding. I'd wake up and just get so dysregulated and kind of couldn't find the forest from the trees. And then had to, what am I feeling? Does this part need to say anything? Seeing where the disempowered parts show up in my body. And going back to that, I'm almost 60 years old. I want to be like a 60-year-old woman and go like, what the heck? This is not okay. And I really did have an opportunity to speak my truth in a way that felt very, very empowering, very true, and to say, you know what? Enough. This needs to stop. So yeah, just a whole big mix of stuff.
Yeah. Well, you did. I mean, it was inspiring for me, like that strength while you hold, we were calling it dysregulation, whatever the reactivity is, and that they don't cancel each other out.
Yeah. And what I talk about with clients is we can't control whether we're going to have a reaction or not. Sometimes our gut very finely tuned nervous systems, and my nervous system was buzzing last night, and I just could not seem to settle it down. I did the things that I knew how to do. And we can't control the initial reaction, but we can control the things that we do afterwards. And, so it was about using tools and walking through this and getting support and doing some hard things and giving myself permission, thinking I wasn't going to sleep last night. And if I chose to not address this, that would also be okay. Really having self-compassion And you and I talked about it too. You said, like, if you didn't sleep and you're not up to it, that's fine too. And so letting all of those things be okay and standing in what I know is true for me and really having to do a lot of letting go around what I think other people are saying and doing and thinking and feeling is just not my business.
It really isn't. I mean, the more I listen to people's different takes on things and points of view, and that is one thing that used to bother me about my personality. I used to be like, why am I so nebulous? Like, why am I like, what's my perspective if I can see all these different perspectives? But I don't know, it's been pretty helpful because that's why narrative therapy can be so helpful. It's like, what is the narrative? There are other narratives. Some of them, can certainly feel like competing narratives, but they can also coexist. Right. And even within ourselves. And yeah, that being okay. I know this was tough for me to be something I didn't like to look at in someone else's story. And that if you're living a full life and you are taking a stand on things, or you are really just not holding back, like, this is what human beings do. Like, we misunderstand each other. It's so common. And then we get, it's hard to be spacious. And then as far as the physical reactions, when you were speaking to it just now, I thought about the time in my life when I had insomnia for 3 solid years. It was really, I did a nice deep dive into becoming a sleep nerd and learning everything I could about it. And it's funny, there would be this point where I could feel it if I was kicked up about something, just the biochemically, like the chemicals getting dumped in my bloodstream. And then just became so clear, like I would get more upset to be fighting that very fact. Or I could switch gears and it could be, okay, wow, because I can feel it. I don't know if that's an HSP thing or whatever, but really I was like, oh, there it is. Okay. It's literally like something's entering my bloodstream and changing my chemistry. And then the game became not how do you stop that flood from happening. It's more like how do I now take care of myself for the next couple hours, because this is going to need to dissipate. I do think that's very relevant for HSPs. I mean, Elaine Aron will even say, if you can rest, you don't necessarily need to be unconscious, but to be able to rest, you get, I think she says 60% of the benefit. I forget where I got that from, but it's floating, it's rattling around in my brain. I think it's similar when we're, when we have that hyper arousal, and then we all equally can't do much about the commiserate hypo arousal that happens.
Right.
So how do we just take care of ourselves?
Yeah. And just knowing that it's going to ebb and flow and to have as much compassion and acceptance for it. It's a process, and sometimes it's easier than others. But that's why we talk about this stuff. That's why you and I do this podcast, is to talk about the real life things that happen, why we struggle, how we struggle, what we do to make it better, and to show that there's hope. But it's okay to have these struggles. That's just part of the human experience. And then we also have these beautiful moments of joy and bliss and peace and connection and support all together.
And sometimes at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's one thing I'm learning about really reaching out and deeply letting people see me and whatever my struggle is in the moment. So, and thank you for both being that for me and then letting me be that for you.
Thank you for the flowers and the berries and the fruit and the sweets, all the yummy, delicious self-care things you sent me from across the world.
I got your number. Trisha, I got you.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for being here today, Jen.
Thank you, my friend.
All righty. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Hey again. So my thought is this just had to be a good enough episode. They're not always going to be stellar, and based on all the things that are going on for Jen and me, the fact that we found time to record this week and we did, it just has to be good enough. Done is better than perfect. Are you struggling with boundaries? Do you struggle with being assertive? Do you have a sense of justice and righteousness and you can set boundaries in certain situations and not others? How are you doing in your relationships, work, life, sense of meaning, purpose, joy, playfulness? Lots of stuff there. If you are wanting support in any or all of those areas, Jen and I both would love to work with you and help you thrive as a highly sensitive person. You can reach out to Jen at heartfulnessconsulting.com. You can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. We have different styles, but I think you have a pretty good sense of who we are and who would be a good fit for you. So if you're interested in working with either one of us, feel free to reach out. I think that's all I have. I deeply appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a listener. I hope you are doing well right now. I hope you are managing. I think that's all I have. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's your superpower. Have a blessed day.